They thought she was just the poor girl from the wrong side of the tracks, a stain on their picture-perfect luxury wedding. Beatrice, the bride, laughed when Mia walked in, wearing a dress she'd sewn herself. The guests sneered when they saw her gift, a handmade photo album. But they didn't know who was watching from the shadows. They didn't know that the man sitting quietly at the back table wasn't just a guest. He was the owner of the entire hotel chain, and they certainly didn't know that he was there for her. When the truth came out, the laughter stopped dead. You won't believe who Mia really was. The invitation had arrived 3 months ago on thick, cream-colored cardstock embossed with gold leaf. It weighed heavy in Mia's hand, smelling faintly of lavender and old money. The honor of your presence is requested at the wedding of Daniel Harper and Beatrice Vanderbilt. The Grand Kensington estate. Black tie. Mia sat at her small, chipped kitchen table in her one-bedroom apartment in downtown Chicago, running her thumb over the gold lettering. Daniel. Her Daniel. The boy who had shared his lunch with her in the 4th grade when she had nothing. The boy she had tutored through high school math so he wouldn't lose his scholarship. They had been inseparable until college, where he met Beatrice. Beatrice was everything Mia wasn't. Loud, wealthy, and cruel. She was the daughter of a real estate tycoon, a woman who treated people like accessories, useful until they went out of style. "Are you really going?" Mia looked up. Her roommate, Jenny, was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You know how Beatrice treats you, Mia. She calls you the charity case behind your back. Why subject yourself to that?" "Because Daniel is my best friend," Mia said softly, though the words felt fragile. "He asked me to be there. He said he couldn't imagine his big day without me." "He hasn't called you in 6 months, Mia," Jenny reminded her gently. "He's been busy planning the wedding," Mia defended him, standing up. "I have to go. I need a dress." That had been the first hurdle. The Grand Kensington estate wasn't just a venue, it was a fortress of wealth, a black tie designation. There meant designer labels, Chanel, Dior, Versace. Mia worked as a junior archivist at the city library. Her rent consumed half her paycheck, and her student loans took the rest. She had exactly $200 in her savings account. She couldn't buy a gown. So, she did what she had always done to survive. She improvised. For 3 weeks, Mia spent her nights hunched over a second-hand sewing machine. She bought emerald green silk from a discount fabric warehouse and found a vintage pattern from the 1950s. She stitched until her fingers bled, pouring every ounce of love and loyalty she had for Daniel into that dress. When she finished, it was beautiful. Simple, elegant, and fitted perfectly to her frame. On the day of the wedding, Mia arrived at the estate in a taxi. The gravel driveway was lined with imported Italian cypress trees. As the taxi pulled up to the entrance, it was dwarfed by a parade of Bentleys, Maybachs, and Ferraris. The valet, a young man in a crisp white uniform, opened the rear door. He paused for a split second when he saw Mia's worn-out heels, but quickly recovered his professional mask. "Welcome to the Kensington, ma'am." Mia stepped out, clutching her purse tight. The air smelled of expensive perfume and fresh peonies. She walked toward the massive oak doors, her heart hammering against her ribs. The reception hall was a ballroom straight out of a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling. The tables were draped in silk and adorned with towering centerpieces of white orchids and hydrangeas. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Mia scanned the room, looking for a friendly face. She saw none. The guests were a sea of diamonds and tuxedos. The women wore gowns that cost more than Mia's annual salary. She felt the eyes on her immediately. It wasn't the emerald dress. It was the lack of jewelry, the scuffed heels she had tried to polish with a marker, the fact that she didn't walk with the entitled swagger of the 1%. Oh, look, the stray cat found her way in. The voice was sharp and unmistakable. Mia froze. Standing near the champagne tower was Beatrice. She looked stunning in a custom Vera Wang gown, her blonde hair swept up in an intricate chignon. But her face was twisted into a smirk that Mia knew all too well. Beatrice was surrounded by her bridesmaids, a clone army of women in dusty rose chiffon. They all turned to look at Mia, their eyes raking over her homemade dress. "Beatrice," Mia said, forcing a smile. "You look beautiful. Congratulations." Beatrice didn't say thank you. She took a sip of her champagne and tilted her head. "I'm surprised the security let you in, Mia. Did you tell them you were part of the catering staff?" The bridesmaids giggled. A flush of heat crept up Mia's neck. "I'm here for Daniel," Mia said, keeping her voice steady. "He invited me." "Right. Daniel," Beatrice sighed dramatically. "He has such a soft spot for broken things. It's his only flaw, really." She stepped closer, invading Mia's personal space. "Listen, let's get one thing straight. This is a high society event. The governor is here. The CAO of Sterling Industries is rumored to be stopping by. Don't embarrass me. And for God's sake, try to stand in the back. That dress screams polyester discount bin." Mia's grip on her purse tightened until her knuckles turned white. "It's silk," she whispered. "Whatever." Beatrice waved her hand dismissively. "Just stay out of the photos." She turned her back on Mia and sauntered away, her entourage trailing behind her. Mia stood alone in the middle of the ballroom, fighting the sting of tears. She looked around for Daniel, hoping to catch his eye, hoping he would come over and defend her. She spotted him near the head table, laughing with a group of men in tuxedos. He looked handsome, happy. He glanced in her direction, and for a second, their eyes met. Mia smiled, taking a small step forward. Daniel's smile faltered. He looked at Mia, then looked at Beatrice, who was now glaring at him from across the room. He hesitated. Then he turned his back on Mia and resumed his conversation. The betrayal hit her harder than Beatrice's insults. Mia found her seat. Table 28. It was the furthest table from the stage, tucked behind a massive pillar near the kitchen doors. The other guests at the table were people Beatrice clearly didn't care about. A distant elderly cousin who was hard of hearing, a former nanny, and a couple of awkward interns from Daniel's firm. Dinner was a 7-course affair featuring lobster thermidor and Wagyu beef. Mia barely touched her food. She just wanted to give Daniel her gift and leave. She hadn't been able to afford something from the registry. The crystal vases and espresso machines were hundreds of dollars. Instead, she had spent the last 6 months curating a memory book. She had dug up photos from their childhood, Daniel winning the spelling bee, the two of them building a treehouse, their high school graduation. She had written captions, recalling inside jokes and promises they had made to always support each other. It was a testament to 20 years of friendship. As the speeches concluded, the DJ announced that it was time to present gifts to the happy couple. Usually, gifts were left on a table in the foyer, but Beatrice, ever the narcissist, had insisted on a presentation hour where select guests brought their gifts to the head table personally. Mia wasn't on the list of select guests, but she waited until the line died down. She clutched the leather-bound album to her chest and walked toward the head table. Beatrice was laughing as she opened a small blue box from Tiffany's, a diamond bracelet from her maid of honor. She held it up for the room to admire. Applause rippled through the hall. Then she saw Mia. The music seemed to dim. The guests nearby quieted down, sensing the tension. "Mia," Daniel said, his voice tight. "You didn't have to bring anything." "I wanted to," Mia said softly. She placed the album on the table. It looked humble next to the silver boxes and designer bags. "It's not much, but it's our history, Daniel. I thought you'd like to remember where you came from." Beatrice snatched the book before Daniel could touch it. "Oh, how quaint," Beatrice said, loud enough for the microphone to pick up. She flipped the cover open. A photo of a 10-year-old Daniel, covered in mud and missing a front tooth, stared back. Beatrice laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "Oh my God! Daniel, look at this! You look like a little street urchin." She held the book up so the room could see. "Everyone, look! Mia brought us a scrapbook. Did you make this with glue sticks and safety scissors, honey? It's adorable. It looks like a third-grade art project." Laughter rippled through the room. It started with the bridesmaids, but spread quickly. The wealthy elite, fueled by expensive wine and mob mentality, found the cruelty entertaining. "It's sentimental," Mia said, her voice shaking. "It's about friendship." "Friendship doesn't pay for the honeymoon, sweetie," Beatrice sneered. She tossed the book onto the table carelessly. It slid off the edge and hit the floor with a heavy thud. A glass of red wine, perched precariously on the edge of the table, tipped over with it. Splash. The dark crimson liquid splashed all over the album and onto the hem of Beatrice's white dress. The room went silent. Beatrice stared at the red stain on her gown. Her face went pale, then violently red. She looked up at Mia with eyes full of pure venom. "You clumsy, jealous little peasant," Beatrice screamed. The microphone screeched. "You did that on purpose." No, I didn't," Mia gasped, reaching for a napkin. "I didn't touch the glass." "Don't touch me," Beatrice swatted Mia's hand away. "Look what you did. This is a $50,000 dress. You couldn't pay for the cleaning bill in a lifetime of shelving books." Daniel stood up. "Bea, calm down. It was an accident." "An accident?" Beatrice whirled on him. "She's been jealous of me since day one. She came here in her trashy homemade dress to ruin my moment because she knows she'll never be anything but a poor nobody." She turned back to Mia, pointing a manicured finger at the door. "Get out. Get out of my wedding right now." Mia looked at Daniel. She pleaded with her eyes. "Say something. Defend me. Tell her I'm your best friend." Daniel looked at his furious wife, then at the hundreds of influential guests watching him. He looked at Mia, trembling in her green dress. "Mia," Daniel said, his voice low. "Maybe you should go." Mia felt something shatter inside her chest. It wasn't her heart, it was her dignity. She nodded slowly, tears finally spilling over. She bent down to pick up the wine-soaked album. "Leave it," Beatrice snapped. "The trash goes in the bin." Mia left the book on the floor. She turned around, her face burning, and began the long walk toward the exit. The click-clack of her heels echoed in the silence. Every eye was on her. Some looked with pity, most with amusement. She reached the heavy oak doors and pushed them open, desperate for the cool night air. "Excuse me." A deep, baritone voice stopped her. Mia froze. She didn't want to turn around. She didn't want another insult. "You dropped this." She turned. Standing there was a man she hadn't noticed before. He was tall, with broad shoulders and dark hair graying slightly at the temples. He wore a tuxedo that fit him with the kind of precision that whispered, "bespoke." He had a sharp jawline and piercing blue eyes that held no mockery, only an intense, calculated curiosity. In his hand, he held the wine-soaked photo album. He had picked it up from the floor. "I don't want it," Mia choked out, wiping her eyes. The man stepped closer. He didn't look like the other guests. He didn't have that glossy, artificial sheen. He looked dangerous, powerful. "You made this?" he asked, looking at the cover. "Yes," Mia whispered. "It takes a lot of skill to bind leather like this," he observed calmly. "And the calligraphy, that's hand-lettered." Mia nodded, confused. Why was this stranger talking to her about bookbinding while she was crying? "Who are you?" she asked. The man smiled. It was a small, dry smile. "I'm the one who's going to make sure you walk back in there with your head up." "I'm not going back in there," Mia said. "They hate me. I'm just a poor nobody, remember?" "Is that what they think?" The man pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and handed it to her. It was silk, embroidered with the initials A.S. "Beatrice thinks money makes her royalty," the man said, looking toward the ballroom doors. "She thinks because her father owns a few hotels in Miami, she owns the world. But she's forgetting something very important about the food chain." "What's that?" Mia asked, blowing her nose. "There's always a bigger predator." He extended his arm to her. "My name is Alexander," he said, "and I believe you and I have some business to discuss. But first, we're going to teach Beatrice a lesson in humility." Mia hesitated. She looked at his hand, then at his eyes. She saw a glimmer of steel there, a promise of retribution. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "Because," Alexander said, his voice dropping an octave, "I saw the way you looked at the groom. That's loyalty. I value loyalty above everything. And I despise bullies." He paused. "Also, I own the bank that holds the mortgage on this estate, and Beatrice's father is currently 3 months behind on his payments." Mia's eyes widened. "Shall we?" Alexander asked. Mia took a deep breath. She smoothed down her emerald silk dress. She took his arm. "Let's go." Re-entering that ballroom was the hardest thing Mia had ever done. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to run back to the safety of her small apartment, to hide under the covers and forget that people like Beatrice Vanderbilt existed. But Alexander's arm was solid beneath her trembling hand. He didn't walk. He glided with an inherent authority that seemed to part the air in front of him. He wasn't just a guest at this party. He moved like he was the architect of the entire building. They pushed open the heavy oak doors. The atmosphere inside had shifted slightly. The initial shock of the wine incident had faded into a buzzing murmur of gossip. The DJ had tentatively started playing a low-tempo jazz number to smooth over the awkwardness. Beatrice was still at the head table, furiously dabbing at her ruined dress with club soda brought by a terrified waiter, while Daniel stood uselessly to the side, looking like a man who wished he could turn invisible. When Mia and Alexander stepped onto the marble floor, it was as if someone had cut the power to the room. The murmurs died instantly. The jazz music seemed to trip over itself before fading into silence. 200 heads turned in unison. They didn't see the poor charity case anymore. They saw a woman in a striking emerald silk gown, a dress that suddenly looked vintage chic rather than homemade, on the arm of a man whose presence was so commanding it sucked the oxygen out of the room. Alexander led her straight toward the head table. He didn't rush. His pace was deliberate, rhythmic, the sound of his polished dress shoes echoing in the terrified silence. Beatrice looked up, her eyes red-rimmed with fury. When she saw Mia returned, her jaw dropped. "You!" Beatrice hissed, standing up and knocking over her chair in the process. "I told you to get out. How dare you show your face in here again after ruining my wedding?" She looked past Mia to Alexander, her eyes narrowing. She didn't recognize him. To Beatrice, anyone she didn't know wasn't worth knowing. "And who is this?" Beatrice sneered, gesturing vaguely at Alexander with a soda-soaked napkin. Did you call an Uber driver to come pick you up? Tell him to wait outside with the other help." A collective gasp rippled through the older guests near the front, the ones who knew exactly who Alexander was. Alexander didn't blink. He stopped 10 feet from the head table, keeping Mia firmly by his side. He looked at Beatrice with the dispassionate interest of a scientist studying a particularly aggressive bacteria under a microscope. "Mrs. Harper," Alexander said. His voice wasn't loud, but it possessed a resonant depth that carried to every corner of the silent hall. "I believe you owe this young lady an apology." Beatrice laughed, a brittle, incredulous sound. "An apology? Are you insane? She threw wine on me. She brought trash into my wedding. Security. Where is security?" "Security works for the hotel," Alexander said calmly, "and the hotel works for me." Beatrice froze. "What?" Before she could process this, a portly man with a rapidly reddening face hustled over from the VIP section. It was Robert Vanderbilt, Beatrice's father. He was sweating profusely, his tuxedo straining at the buttons. "Mr. Sterling!" Robert gasped, practically bowing as he approached. "Mr. Alexander Sterling. Good heavens, we didn't know you were attending. What an honor. A tremendous honor." The name Sterling hit the room like a physical blow. The whispers started up again, frantic this time. Sterling Global Finance, the Sterling Foundation, old money, real power. Beatrice's face went from red to dead white. She looked at her father, who was trembling, then at Alexander, who was watching her with icy amusement. "Daddy," she squeaked. "You know him?" "Beatrice, shut up," Robert snapped, a bead of sweat dripping off his nose. He turned back to Alexander, wringing his hands. "Mr. Sterling, please forgive my daughter. She's under a lot of stress. It's her big day. I'm sure whatever misunderstanding has occurred—" "It is no misunderstanding, Robert," Alexander cut him off smoothly. He didn't raise his voice, but the menace was palpable. "Your daughter publicly humiliated my companion. She behaved with the grace and manners of a spoiled toddler. I found it distasteful." He let the word hang in the air. Distasteful. Coming from Alexander Sterling. That word could end careers. Robert turned pale. He looked at Mia, really looked at her for the first time. He saw the emerald dress, the tear-stained cheeks, and the man holding her arm. "Beatrice," Robert said, his voice shaking with suppressed panic. "Apologize to Mia. Now." "But Daddy, now!" Robert roared, causing half the room to jump. "Apologize for your appalling behavior." Beatrice looked trapped. She looked at Daniel, who was staring at his shoes. She looked at her bridesmaids, who were suddenly very interested in their bouquets. She was completely alone. She turned to Mia. Her lips were pressed so tightly together they were white. "I'm sorry," Beatrice ground out, the words sounding like they were physically painful to say. "I overreacted about the wine." "And the book," Alexander prompted gently. Beatrice flinched. "And the book." It was a thoughtful gift. It was the most insincere apology Mia had ever heard, but the sight of Beatrice Vanderbilt, the queen bee, the bully, humbled before the entire Chicago elite, was a balm to Mia's wounded soul. "Thank you, Beatrice," Mia said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I accept your apology." Alexander nodded once, satisfied. He turned his gaze to Robert Vanderbilt. "We will speak on Monday, Robert. About the arrears." Robert looked like he might faint. Yes, of course, Mr. Sterling. Monday." "Come along, Mia," Alexander said, turning his back on the head table without another glance. "The air in here has become stale. I think we require a change of scenery." He led her away from the wreckage of the head table, through the parting sea of stunned guests. Mia felt a strange cocktail of emotions, vindication, disbelief, and a growing curiosity about the man beside her. Daniel watched them go. He took a step forward as if to follow, then stopped. He looked back at his furious, wine-stained bride and realized with a sinking heart that he had made a terrible, irreversible mistake. Alexander didn't lead her towards the exit. Instead, he steered her toward a discreet mahogany door set into the far wall of the ballroom, away from the main elevators. He produced a sleek black keycard from his pocket and swiped it. The door clicked open, revealing a private elevator. "Where are we going?" Mia asked, her heart rate finally starting to slow down from the adrenaline of the confrontation. "The penthouse," Alexander said, as the doors slid shut, sealing them in quiet luxury. "I keep a private residence at all of my major hotel properties. I find hotel rooms impersonal." The ride was smooth and silent. When the doors opened, Mia stepped out into a space that was larger than her entire apartment building. It was a stunning penthouse suite, decorated in minimalist tones of charcoal, cream, and deep wood. 2-story floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering Chicago skyline. But what drew Mia's eye wasn't the view or the modern art on the walls. It was the library. One entire side of the penthouse was dedicated to books. Custom shelving reached 20 feet high, accessible by a rolling brass ladder. It smelled of old paper, leather, and beeswax, the scent Mia loved most in the world. "Make yourself comfortable," Alexander said, walking over to a wet bar carved from the black marble. "Drink?" "Water, please," Mia said, still clutching her small purse. She wandered toward the bookshelves, drawn like a moth to a flame. She ran her fingers along the spines. These weren't just decorations. They were rare editions. First editions of Dickens, leather-bound collections of historical treatises, illuminated manuscripts that looked centuries old. It was a treasure trove. "You like them," Alexander stated. He walked over, handing her a crystal glass of iced water. He held a tumbler of amber liquid for himself. "Like them?" "This is incredible," Mia breathed. "I'm an archivist. This is better than some sections of the city museum." "My mother collected them," Alexander said, taking a sip of his drink. His eyes softened slightly as he looked at the towering shelves. "She hated the transient nature of wealth. Stocks crash, real estate bubbles burst. But knowledge, history, that endures. She spent her life curating this collection across our various properties." He walked over to a small glass-topped display table in the center of the room. He gestured for Mia to join him. Under the glass lay a book. It was old, its cover made of deep blue velvet, embroidered with silver thread that had tarnished with age. "This was her favorite," Alexander said softly. "A 16th century collection of French poetry. She rebound it herself when I was a child. She taught me that how you protect something shows how much you value it." He turned to face Mia, his blue eyes intense. "When I saw that album you made tonight," he continued, "I didn't see glue and scissors, as Beatrice so eloquently put it. I saw the hand-stitching on the spine. I saw the acid-free paper you chose to protect the photographs. I saw the way you embossed the leather cover. You have a gift, Mia, a respect for preservation that is rare in this disposable world." Mia felt a blush rising, but this time it wasn't from shame. It was from being truly seen for the first time in years. "Thank you," she whispered. I wanted Daniel to have something that lasted." "Daniel is a fool who trades gold for glitter," Alexander said dismissively. He set his glass down. "But his loss is my gain. I have a proposition for you, Mia." Mia's stomach did a small flip. "A proposition?" "My mother passed away 4 years ago," Alexander said, turning back to the window, looking out at the city lights. Since then, her collection, thousands of rare books and manuscripts scattered across my properties in London, New York, Dubai, and here, has lain dormant. It needs care. It needs cataloguing. It needs someone who understands its value, not just financially, but intrinsically. He turned back to her. I want you to manage the Sterling family archives. You would be in charge of consolidating, restoring, and preserving the entire collection. You would have an unlimited budget for materials and travel. You would answer only to me. Mia stared at him. Her job at the city library was entry-level. She spent her days scanning microfiche and yelling at teenagers to be quiet. This was the kind of job people in her field dreamed of at the pinnacle of their careers. "You're offering me a job?" she asked, dumbfounded. "I'm offering you a purpose," Alexander corrected, "and a salary of $250,000 a year to start, plus living accommodations at whichever property you are currently working at." The glass of water nearly slipped from Mia's hand. That was 5 times her current salary. It was life-changing money. It was never worry about rent again money. Pay off all student loans tomorrow money. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You don't even know me. I was crying in a driveway an hour ago." "I know enough," Alexander said, moving closer. He wasn't threatening, but his intensity was overwhelming. "I know you are loyal to a fault. I know you possess a rare skill that my family needs, and I know that you have a spine made of steel beneath that silk dress, or you would have let Beatrice break you years ago." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a plain white business card with only a number embossed on it. "Beatrice Vanderbilt will spend the rest of her life chasing status, terrified of losing her position." "She is weak," Alexander declared. He pressed the card into Mia's palm. Her skin tingled where his fingers brushed hers. "You, Mia, have spent your life surviving with dignity when you had nothing. That makes you strong. I want that strength on my team." He stepped back, giving her space. "Think about it. But don't think too long. I leave for London on Tuesday morning. I'd like my new head archivist on the plane with me." Mia looked down at the card in her hand, then up at the magnificent library, and finally at the man who had plucked her out of humiliation and offered her the world. The image of Daniel turning his back on her flashed in her mind, the sound of Beatrice's cruel laughter. She squeezed the card tightly in her hand. "I don't need to think about it," Mia said, her voice clear and strong in the quiet room. "When do I start?" 8 months later, the grey skies of London looked nothing like the dreary clouds Mia used to watch from her Chicago apartment window. From the 24th floor of the Sterling Global Headquarters in Canary Wharf, the rain looked like liquid silver washing over the city. Mia stood by the window, sipping an espresso. She looked different. The girl who had hunched her shoulders to make herself smaller was gone. In her place stood a woman, wearing a tailored navy blazer and cream trousers from Savile Row. Her hair, once pulled back in a messy ponytail, was now cut in a sleek, chic bob that framed her face. But the biggest change was in her eyes. They were sharp, focused, and calm. She wasn't just cataloguing books anymore. She was curating history. "The auction for the grand opening in Chicago is finalized," a voice said from the doorway. Mia turned. Alexander stood there, leaning against the doorframe. Over the last 8 months, they had traveled to Paris, Milan, and Dubai. They had spent late nights arguing over the provenance of 17th century manuscripts and early mornings drinking coffee in airport lounges. The lines between employer and employee had blurred, replaced by a partnership built on fierce intellectual respect and a simmering, unspoken tension that electrified the air whenever they were in the same room. Are we really ready for Chicago? Mia asked, setting her cup down on the glass desk. You know the press will be there. The Vanderbilts might be there. Alexander walked over to her desk. He picked up a leather-bound catalogue she had finalized that morning. The Vanderbilts are currently trying to sell their yacht to pay off interest on their loans. I doubt they are in a partying mood. Besides, this isn't just a party, Mia. It's the unveiling of the Sterling Library Wing. It's your masterpiece. He looked at her, his gaze dropping to her lips for a fraction of a second before returning to her eyes. You aren't afraid of them anymore, are you? No, Mia said, and realized it was true. I'm not afraid. I don't want the drama to overshadow the work. The only thing anyone will be looking at is you, Alexander said quietly. The moment was interrupted by the buzzing of Mia's phone on the desk. She glanced at the screen and froze. Caller ID. Daniel Harper. She hadn't spoken to him since the wedding. She had blocked his number for months, but she had recently got a new business phone, and the number must have synced with old contacts. Him? Alexander asked, his expression hardening. Yes, Mia said. She hesitated, then hit the green button. She put it on speaker. Mia. Daniel's voice sounded ragged, breathless. Oh God, you actually picked up. I've been trying to find you. I went to your old apartment, but the landlord said you moved out months ago. What do you want, Daniel? Mia asked, her voice cool. I need to see you, Daniel pleaded. I heard you're coming back to Chicago for the Sterling Gala next week. Please, meet me. Just for coffee. 10 minutes. I don't have time for coffee, Daniel. I have a job. Mia, please. His voice cracked. My life is falling apart. Beatrice, she's out of control. I made a mistake, a huge mistake. I need to talk to my best friend. Mia looked at Alexander. His face was unreadable, but his jaw was clenched tight. He gave her a small nod, leaving the choice to her. I'm not your best friend anymore, Daniel, Mia said. You made that very clear when you let your wife humiliate me. I was a coward, Daniel shouted, sounding desperate. I know I was, and I'm paying for it every single day. She spent everything, Mia. Her father is broke, and she's draining my accounts to keep up appearances. I'm drowning. Just meet me at the old diner on 4th Street. Before the gala. Please. Mia felt a strange sensation. It wasn't pity, exactly. It was the feeling of looking at an old photograph of a stranger. Fine, Mia said. 10 minutes. Tuesday at noon. She hung up. You're going? Alexander asked, his voice stiff. I need to close the book, Mia said, using an archival term. The narrative is dangling. I need to write the end. Alexander walked over to her. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her jawline. The touch sent a jolt of heat straight to her core. Just remember, Alexander said, his voice low and possessive. You don't belong to that world anymore. You belong to the future. Don't let the past drag you down. Chicago was windy and cold when they landed on Monday. The city that had once felt like a prison of poverty now felt like a playground. They stayed in the penthouse again. But this time, Mia wasn't a guest sleeping on the couch. She was the second in command of the event. On Tuesday at noon, Mia walked into Lou's diner. It was a greasy spoon where she and Daniel used to study during college because the coffee was bottomless and cost $1. She saw him immediately in the back booth. Daniel looked 10 years older. He had gained weight, his face was puffy, and his suit, though expensive, was wrinkled and stained. He was nervously tearing a paper napkin into tiny shreds. When he saw Mia, he stopped. He stared at her tailored trench coat, her designer bag, her glowing skin. He stood up, looking like he wanted to hug her, but her body language stopped him cold. "Mia," he breathed, "you look expensive." "I look like myself, Daniel," she said, sliding into the booth opposite him. She didn't take off her coat. "You have 10 minutes. I miss you," he blurted out. "God, I miss you. She's a monster, Mia. She screams all day. She throws things. Her dad is under investigation for fraud. Did you know that? The SEC is involved, and she blames me. She says I'm not making enough money to support her lifestyle." He reached across the table, trying to take Mia's hand. She pulled it back. "I should have married you," Daniel whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "I know that now. We were always meant to be, weren't we? The two of us against the world." Mia looked at him. This man she had once thought was her soulmate. She realized Alexander was right. Daniel didn't love her. He loved having a safety net. He loved having someone who adored him unconditionally while offering nothing in return. "We were never meant to be, Daniel," Mia said gently. "I was your crutch, and you were my ceiling. You limited me." "That's not true. I can change," Daniel pleaded. "I'm going to leave her. I'll file for divorce. We can start over. I saw the news. You work for Sterling now. That's great. We could be a power couple." Mia laughed. It was a genuine laugh of disbelief. "You think I'm here to rescue you? You think because I have money now, I can fix your mistakes? No, I mean, we have history." "History belongs in the past," Mia said, standing up. "I didn't come here to get back together, Daniel. I came here to tell you that I forgive you." Daniel blinked. "You do?" "Yes. I forgive you for being weak. Because if you hadn't been weak, if you hadn't let her kick me out of that wedding, I never would have met Alexander. I never would have found my true potential. So thank you, Daniel. You breaking my heart was the best thing that ever happened to me." She dropped a $20 bill on the table, enough to cover his coffee and a very generous tip for the waitress. "Goodbye, Daniel." She walked out of the diner, the bell chiming above the door. She didn't look back. Outside, a sleek black town car was waiting. Alexander was in the back seat, reviewing documents on a tablet. When Mia slid in, he looked up. He scanned her face, searching for any sign of regret or sadness. "Well?" he asked. "Let's go to the gala," Mia smiled, feeling lighter than air. "I have a library to open." The Sterling Foundation Gala was the event of the decade. The grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hotel had been transformed into a literary wonderland. Walls were lined with projections of ancient text, and the centerpieces were sculptures made of recycled book pages. The guest list was a who's who of global influence. Senators, tech billionaires, and art collectors mingled, drinking vintage champagne. When Mia and Alexander entered, flashbulbs erupted like a lightning storm. Mia wore a gown of deep midnight blue velvet, off the shoulder, with a necklace of sapphires that Alexander had gifted her that morning. "On loan from the family vault," he had claimed, though his eyes said otherwise. They moved through the room as a unit. Mia charmed the French ambassador with fluent French, a skill she had polished in Paris, and discussed investment strategies with the CEO of a major tech firm. She was in her element, but in the shadows, the vipers were waiting. Beatrice Harper was there. She shouldn't have been. The Vanderbilts had been quietly removed from the guest list weeks ago, but Beatrice had used an old connection with a catering manager to slip in through the back. She stood near the bar, clutching a glass of vodka. She looked gaunt. Her Vera Wang wedding dress was a distant memory. Tonight she wore a flashy, sequined red dress that looked cheap under the ballroom lights. She watched Mia laughing with the elite, and hatred burned in her gut like acid. She stole my life, Beatrice thought. That should be me. The money, the attention, the man. "Are you sure this will work?" Daniel asked nervously from beside her. He looked terrified. "Shut up," Beatrice hissed. "Daddy's lawyers found it. It's perfect. It will destroy her credibility. Sterling will fire her on the spot, and she'll be back to nothing." She clutched a manila envelope in her hand. "It's showtime." At 9 p.m., Alexander took the stage. The room quieted. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alexander began, his voice commanding the room. "Tonight is about preserving history. It is about truth. And there is one person who has dedicated her life to this truth. The curator of the Sterling collection, Ms. Mia Evans." Applause broke out. Mia smiled and began to walk toward the stage. "Stop!" The shriek tore through the applause. Beatrice marched into the center of the room, followed reluctantly by Daniel. The crowd parted, confused. "Beatrice," Alexander said from the stage, his voice dropping to a dangerous chill. "Security! Don't you dare!" Beatrice screamed, holding up the envelope. "You talk about truth? You're harboring a criminal. Mia Evans is a fraud." The room gasped. Phones came out, recording instantly. Mia stopped halfway to the stage. She turned to face Beatrice. She didn't tremble this time. She just looked tired of this woman. "What are you doing, Beatrice?" Mia asked calmly. "Exposing you," Beatrice yelled. She ripped open the envelope and threw papers into the air. Look at this. It's a police report from 5 years ago. Mia Evans was fired from her university library job for theft. She stole rare books and sold them on the black market." The papers fluttered down. A few guests near the front picked them up. They looked like official police documents. Murmurs of shock rippled through the room. "She's a thief!" Beatrice pointed a shaking finger at Mia. "She conned you, Alexander. She's probably stealing from you right now. She's nothing but a poor, desperate criminal." Daniel stood behind Beatrice, looking at the floor, unable to meet Mia's eyes. For a moment, the accusation hung heavy in the air. In high society, the rumor of theft was enough to ruin a reputation forever. The guests looked at Mia with suspicion. Mia walked over to one of the guests, a banker named Mr. Henderson, and gently took the paper from his hand. She looked at it. Then she looked up at the stage. At Alexander. Alexander wasn't panicked. He was smiling. But it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf who had just watched a rabbit run voluntarily into its jaws. "Is that all you have, Mrs. Harper?" Alexander asked from the stage. "Is that all?" Beatrice scoffed. "It's proof. She's a convicted thief." "Actually," Alexander said, descending the stairs from the stage. He held a microphone in his hand. "That document is a forgery. A rather poor one, I might add." "It's real," Beatrice insisted. "My father's private investigator found it." "Your father's investigator?" Alexander chuckled darkly. He reached Mia's side and put a protective arm around her waist. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Detective Miller of the Chicago Police Department regarding the actual theft taking place." The doors to the ballroom burst open. 4 uniformed officers and a man in a trench coat walked in. They weren't coming for Mia. They walked straight toward the back of the room, where Robert Vanderbilt, Beatrice's father, was trying to sneak out toward the kitchen. "Robert Vanderbilt!" Detective Miller shouted. "You are under arrest for corporate embezzlement, wire fraud, and the forgery of government documents." Robert froze. The guests gasped louder this time. Beatrice turned around, her eyes wide with horror. "Daddy!" "And," Alexander continued, his voice cutting through the chaos, "I believe we also have a warrant for Beatrice Harper." Beatrice stumbled back. "Me? I didn't do anything." "Attempted extortion," Alexander said calmly, "and conspiracy to defame. You see, Beatrice, when your father's investigator tried to plant those fake records in the university database last week, the university flagged it immediately. They called me. We've been watching you fabricate this lie for 6 days." Mia stepped forward. She held up the fake police report Beatrice had thrown. "You were so desperate to bring me down," Mia said, her voice ringing clear in the silent ballroom, "that you committed a felony to do it." "No, this is a mistake," Beatrice cried, looking around for support. But the sea of faces was cold. Her friends were turning away. The police reached Robert Vanderbilt and handcuffed him. He was sobbing. 2 other officers approached Beatrice. "Mrs. Harper, please come with us," the officer said. "Daniel!" Beatrice screamed, grabbing her husband's arm. "Daniel, do something! Tell them you helped me plan it!" The room went dead silent. Daniel looked at the police officers. Then he looked at Mia, standing in her blue velvet gown, looking like a queen. Daniel stammered. "Daniel!" Beatrice shrieked. "Don't you dare leave me alone in this." "You dragged me into this," Daniel said, his voice shaking but loud enough to be heard. He stepped away from her. "I told you to stop. I told you I didn't want to be part of the forgery." "You coward!" Beatrice lunged at him, scratching at his face with her nails. The police had to physically restrain her. As they dragged a screaming Beatrice and a weeping Robert out of the ballroom, the flashbulbs went crazy. It was the scandal of the century. The Vanderbilt empire had fallen in real time, right in the middle of the Sterling Gala. When the doors finally closed, the silence in the room was deafening. Alexander raised the microphone one last time. "I apologize for the interruption," he said smoothly, as if he had just cleared a spilled drink rather than orchestrated the arrest of a prominent socialite. "It seems we have taken out the trash. Now, if we could return our attention to the woman of the hour." He turned to Mia. The look in his eyes was so full of pride and adoration that Mia felt her knees go weak. "Mia," he said, "the floor is yours." The applause that followed was thunderous. It wasn't polite clapping anymore. It was a standing ovation. Mia walked to the microphone. She looked out at the crowd, then at the empty space where Beatrice had stood, and finally at Alexander. She took a deep breath. She had won. But more importantly, she was free. The adrenaline that had sustained Mia throughout the gala didn't fade until the doors of Alexander's Rolls-Royce clicked shut, sealing out the flashing cameras. The ballroom was behind them, left to the police and the cleaning crews, sweeping up the wreckage of the Vanderbilt reputation. Mia sat in the quiet luxury of the car, watching the rain-slicked city blur past. Alexander reached across the console, his hand finding hers. The contact was grounding, a tether in the storm. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "I feel—" Mia took a deep breath, testing the weight in her chest. It was gone. Lighter. For years I carried their opinion of me like a backpack full of stones. Tonight I realized I don't need them to see me. I see myself. Alexander smiled in the darkness. "That is the most dangerous kind of freedom, Mia." The fallout was swift and brutal. The press dubbed it the Red Wedding Scandal, a nod to the cheap red dress Beatrice had worn while screaming at the police. Robert Vanderbilt was denied bail. The investigation revealed a Ponzi scheme that had been propping up their lifestyle for a decade. Beatrice was charged as an accomplice to fraud and attempted extortion. Her mugshot, mascara running, hair disheveled, replaced her society photos in the tabloids. She had chased status until it consumed her. And Daniel, his fate was quieter, but just as devastating. 3 months after the gala, Mia was leaving a meeting in the financial district, wrapped in a cashmere coat. She stopped at a crosswalk, checking her phone, when a city bus hissed to a halt beside her. The doors opened, and a man stepped off. He wore a generic, ill-fitting uniform for a discount electronics store. He looked older, His shoulders slumped under the weight of a life that hadn't turned out as planned. It was Daniel. He looked up and froze. The world seemed to pause. He took in Mia's appearance, the Italian leather boots, the confidence in her posture, the sapphire ring catching the sunlight. Then he looked down at his own polyester name tag and the plastic bag containing his lunch. He opened his mouth, perhaps to apologize, or maybe to beg. But Mia's expression stopped him. There was no anger left in her eyes. There was no longing. There was only a polite, distant recognition, the kind you give a stranger. The light changed. Mia nodded once, a final, silent goodbye, and stepped off the curb. She didn't look back. She walked toward the Sterling Tower, toward her future. Daniel stood on the corner, watching her disappear into the crowd. The realization hit him with crushing force. He had held a diamond in his hand and traded it for a handful of broken glass. He turned and walked slowly toward the subway, alone. 1 year later, the air was crisp, smelling of pine and expensive champagne. Mia stood on a balcony overlooking a sprawling garden. But this wasn't the Sterling penthouse. It was the Grand Kensington estate, the very place where Beatrice had humiliated her in that green dress. "It looks different without the pretension," Alexander said, joining her. He wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Why did we come here, Alexander?" Mia asked. "Of all the places?" He turned her to face him. The intensity in his blue eyes was warmer now, tempered by a deep, abiding love. "Because I believe in rewriting history. I didn't like the memory you associated with this place, so I bought it." Mia's eyes widened. "You bought the Kensington." "I bought the hotel chain," he corrected casually. "Beatrice's father's assets were liquidated. I acquired the portfolio this morning, and I decided that under new management, this estate needed a new purpose." He gestured to the ballroom behind them. The doors were open, revealing not wedding tables, but rows of bookshelves. "I'm turning the Grand Kensington into the headquarters for the Sterling Foundation's literacy program," Alexander explained. "This won't be a place for vain parties anymore. It will be a library, a school, a place where children who have nothing, children like you were, Mia, can access the world's knowledge for free." Tears pricked Mia's eyes. "You turned my nightmare into a sanctuary." "I did it for us," Alexander said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of heavy iron keys. "I appointed a new director for the foundation this morning. She's brilliant, brave, and she once bound a book so beautiful it made a billionaire fall in love with her." Mia laughed, a sound of pure joy. "I accept the position." "Good," Alexander said, his expression turning serious. "But there is one condition to the employment." "Oh?" "The director must agree to marry the chairman, right here, in the garden." Mia looked at him. She thought about the girl she used to be, and the woman she had become. She looked at the man who had seen her value when the world saw only poverty. "No," Mia said softly. Alexander blinked, surprised. "No? Not in the garden," Mia smiled, pulling him down for a kiss. "And not next week. Tomorrow. I don't want to wait another day to start our life." Alexander laughed, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. Below them, the sun was setting over the estate, casting long, golden shadows over the place where Mia had once been an outcast. She wasn't the poor girl anymore. She was Mia Evans Sterling, the keeper of stories, and the woman who had turned her darkest hour into a dawn that would last forever. And that is the incredible story of Mia and Alexander. It's a powerful reminder that true worth isn't measured by the label on your dress, but by your resilience and how you treat others when you think no one is watching. Beatrice and Daniel chased the appearance of wealth and lost everything, while Mia chased her passion and integrity and ended up with the world at her feet. What would you have done if you were in Mia's shoes? Would you have forgiven Daniel? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and romance, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss the next story. Thanks for watching.